Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We'll probably start in a few moments, but in the meantime, I'd like to introduce Tom Akehurst and Refael, Botbol, Weiss. That will be handling the webinar. Feel free to ask us any questions in the chat. The Q&A will come at the end, and we've got some interesting stuff at the end to tell you, so hang on in there. Refael, you want to take it from here?
Yes, Avi, thank you very much. And thank you everyone for joining us. A little bit of housekeeping before we start. And I give Tom the pleasure to take Warmock for a spin on Kubernetes here. Don't worry, we're recording everything. Yeah, recording is checked. We're gonna have a Q&A session at the end. Please feel free. Tom and I will look at the Q&A as we go. If we see something that is relevant, we'll take it there or answer it in the Q&A. And we're going to send everything to you all after that. So pay attention. A lot of things going to happen. And Tom, have fun.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming. Let's see if I can move the slide on. There we go. I was actually going to say quickly that this is our first official webinar as one company. So
yeah,
WireMock and MockLab are now part of the Up9 family. I'm a member of the Up9 team, and this has been the case since about 2 months ago, I think. So yeah,
you got promoted from a beer friend to a colleague now.
Yeah. So here we are. So I'm sure nearly all of you know pretty much what WireMock and MockLab are, so I'm not going to spend very long on this part, but just in case there's anyone listening who's not entirely sure what the difference is or is familiar with one and not the other. WireMock is an open source library. It's it's sort of embeddable in your unit tests or runnable standalone, but it's headless, so it's kind of a programmer focused tool. You can configure it from its file API or via its HTTP API or by writing code, but it doesn't have a UI. MockLab, by comparison, is a product which is built on top of WireMock, so it uses WireMock as its core engine, but it gives you a full UI. It gives you sort of team collaboration and security, and that sort of stuff that you need if you're if you're working in a team on this kind of stuff. And crucially, it's a SaaS product, so it runs in the cloud. Everything is on an internet IP address, which is very quick and easy, and you don't have to install anything, but comes with some limitations as well, as we'll discuss in a moment. MockLab also supports some external formats that WireMock doesn't currently. So OpenAPI or Swagger, if you're still on version 2, there's Postman support as well, and the ability to generate JSON web tokens. So we sort of consistently, from a number of places, got these same bits of feedback, from customers or users of WireMock or potential customers. That we want to be able to deploy and run these things on premise. There are lots of organizations who have security or kind of regulatory constraints that mean that they can't easily run things out in the cloud. There are some organizations for whom it just doesn't make sense to have bits of your test environment out on the internet. If you're doing a microservices architecture and everything's kind of running in the same cluster, then having your mocks or bits of your test environment outside of that is not necessarily the sort of the optimal way to set things up. So while it's possible to run WireMock pretty much anywhere, you can run it locally, you can run it in Docker, you can build a server around the kind of the standalone mode. As I said before, it doesn't come with the UI, so you lose that kind of rapid turnaround, iterating on your mock API, or maybe even prototyping one that you haven't implemented yet. So the feedback that we've been receiving is that we want this, and we want to run it kind of on our own infrastructure. And then finally, the Open API thing as well. More and more teams are using Open API as a way of sharing their API specifications with other teams, or for validation purposes, for design purposes, all that kind of stuff. And so it's becoming more and more of a sort of essential feature for that to be sort of tightly integrated with mocking tools. So taking all this feedback into account, we're announcing today the launch of this new product called Warmock Studio. So no one else has seen this before. You're the very first group of people to sort of set eyes on this. And essentially what it is, it's a version of WireMock that you can deploy and run on your desktop, in your in Docker or on your Kubernetes cluster. It's got a full web UI. It's if you've used MockLab, then it'll look suspiciously familiar. You can mock multiple APIs easily. You get the the ability to import from other formats, and best of all, we're giving it away for free. So I think a demo is worth 1,000 words. So I'm going to launch straight in and kind of show you quickly how Warmock Studio works and what it can do, and hopefully it will that will kind of clarify what I'm talking about. So I'm now going to switch to showing you my console. See if I can get that right. Okay, so just before I launch straight into this, to give a little bit of context, we're running everything on a Kubernetes cluster that's itself running on Google Cloud Platform, and we've deployed into it this application called WeaveSox. And this is essentially a kind of a demo microservice application that was built by Weaveworks, and it's essentially this fake kind of e-commerce site, but it's architected in a sort of a fairly realistic way. So you've got individual services for things like catalog and orders and shopping cart and user management, and that they're talking to each other via APIs. So it makes for a good system on which to demo, because it's like I say, it's got a sort of somewhat realistic architecture, and it isn't isn't completely trivial. So this is the web application, the front end of the WeaveSox app. And if I click into here, I should be able to see a catalogue of various different kinds of socks. And what I want to do, so say if I go and click into this individual item, so I'm viewing the detail of a particular catalogue item. The data for this behind the scenes is coming from an API called catalog, and as you might expect, it's got a REST interface, and it returns JSON containing catalog data. So I'm sort of inviting you to suppose that we want to do some testing that involves tweaking things coming out of the catalog, and we don't want to have to go in and muck around with the real system. We just want to use mocking as a means of tweaking data and trying things out. So what we want to do is to essentially put WireMock kind of in the middle of all of this. So we want the front end of WeaveSox to start talking to a mock version of that catalog API, and then we want we want to sort of proxy that data back through to the real API, and then we want to be able to stub individual responses. So we want to kind of stub by exception. So that's what we're aiming for. So I'm going to do a little bit of setup in order to make that possible. So first of all, one of the real benefits of Kubernetes is that because it has this service abstraction as standard, this means that we can kind of rewire things within our cluster very easily by manipulating services. So I've created a Kubernetes manifest, which I can use just to kind of switch the services around and essentially perform the routing that I just described. So if I say, move this down a bit so I can actually read it. There we go. Y minus F. Sorry, it's not catalog service. Okay, so if we do this, we're doing well. In a moment, it will tell me that it's okay. So we've changed the catalog service. So this is the one that already existed, but we've now repointed it to it's actually support 8,000 on our WireMock Studio service. And we've created this new real catalog service, and that's the one that's going to point back at the original service. So try and bear this in mind. We've got a real catalog as our sort of real backend, and we're aiming for port 8,000 on our mock. So now I'm going to switch over to Warmock Studio. So this is deployed in our Kubernetes cluster also. It's just a single pod, nice and simple. And I'm going to create a new mock API using the blank template. I'll call it catalog, and I'm going to put it on port 8,000 like we talked about. So we created a new API. Currently, we don't have any stubs in here. So first of all, like I said, what we want to do is, by default, we want to proxy traffic back to that real catalog API, so that, you know, by default, things are just flowing kind of through WireMock and back out the other side. So I'm going to call this the proxy all stub. I'm going to say any URL, don't care about that, any URL on the match type. And I'm going to make it a low priority because we want any stubs that we create to be a higher priority. You know, we want those to be matched first, and then only if none of those match, then, you know, we want the proxy stub to do its work. And then finally, we need to say where we're actually proxying to. So you remember how we created this service called Real Catalog. So that means that we have the corresponding DNS name and base URL of Real Catalog. So hit save. We created this. So now if we go and we can do a quick test, if we say get/catalog with our test requester, then you can see we've got this nice big blob of JSON back, and that's since we don't have a stub configured for that. This is good news. This means that you know, this proxy configuration has worked okay. So we'll get that out of the way. So now that we've got this proxy set up, we can go and interact with the application. Only now the traffic is flowing through the middle of WireMock. So let's go and refresh this page. Yeah, at the moment, everything will look exactly the same. But if we go and have a quick look in the request log, we can see that these requests have appeared, and these are generated by, you know, via you know, the traffic I just generated when I hit refresh. And this one in particular, so this is the URL for that single catalog item. So this is the one we're interested in. You see it's got the details of, you know, the name, description, price, all of that kind of stuff for this, you know, the sock item that we saw on the catalog page. So say this is, we want to tweak some data in this now. So we're going to hit convert to stub. All right. Demonstrate this cursor here. Okay, I don't know why that's what's happened there. But let's go to plan B and create it by hand. Say holy sock item. It's a get request, and we're going to this URL here. And so let's save this and go and grab the JSON that we wanted. Like this is the response. We'll say that it's JSON that we want to send, and let's just format that nicely. So with any luck now, we should still be able to go and refresh our page and have everything work as expected. Okay, so let's say we now want to start changing things. So let's say so there's a socks bit for the Messiah. So let's say
For all the Monty Python fans here.
Yep. Okay, so now if we go in there, here's the description. We refresh it, and there we go. We've got our new text that we injected in there. And you know, we might want to sort of make the price insanely high as well, something like that. So you know, we can do that. We can refresh it, and so, you know, we've got the most expensive pair of socks in existence. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. You know, so we have this easy workflow for you know, for wiring WireMock into the middle of our application, and then going in and tweaking things. And you know, there's all sorts of stuff we could do here. We could inject faults if we decided we wanted to do something really nasty. We could send non-200 statuses. You know, if we wanted to.
But I think we lost Tom there for a couple of moments. Can you take over?
Yeah, I was wondering if I lost Tom or we all lost Tom. We'll give him a second to recover. Or meanwhile, I'll just share my screen and take it from there. Let's see. Okay. So just going back to what Tom, until he joins us in recap, Warmock Studio gives you the UI for the Warmock. If you a mock lab customer, you will find it right at home, and allows you to basically deploy the mock locally or as part of your Kubernetes cluster in a very breeze, seamless, no sweat way. Okay, great. We got the mocks. Kubernetes. Who is afraid of Kubernetes? Or as I say, with Kubernetes, things get a little bit more complicated. Suddenly, things are not working only on our environment. And how are we actually going to debug all our services? Tom showed you, hey, we created a proxy. Who of us that used mocks and services tried to get something like, I don't get the request from my mock. What happened? Is it the load balancer? Maybe the wrong environment. Today, I'm going to talk to you about a couple of use cases specifically also for people that use mocks, and like how do you troubleshoot networking problem in the Kubernetes? How do you observe mocks versus real traffic? What Tom showed you, great. You have the request log, helps you start really fast. What happens if you want to see the traffic which is not related to the mock? How do you get that proxy to support that? And identify payload issues, like what happens if we want to make sure that one of the payloads here, Tom is back. Good to have you back, mate. We're having payloads with the issue. How can we debug that? So just like Warmock, I want to introduce you to a new tool called Mizu. Mizu is basically an open source tool that allows you to inspect your Kubernetes traffic really, really easily. How it does that? It basically deploys itself into your Kubernetes cluster. You don't need like SDK, or you don't need to change your infrastructure. Just point to your Kubernetes cluster. It gets itself deployed there, and then it monitors all your microservices, regardless of the protocol, by the way, if it's REST, gRPC, Kafka. So you can really debug and troubleshoot all those things. Think of it like Wireshark meets Kubernetes, and then deliver all that to you with the breeze of the DevOps tool that you are used to in your Chrome browser. And I want to demo that to you. It's going to be super fast. I'm going to show you how I install Mizu with basically 4 seconds. Tap into a Kubernetes cluster, filter mess with the filtering, see how I can track some traffic, and then show you a couple of use cases with that. Just validating, Tom, you can see my screen, right? And the presentation, everything looks good?
I can, yes. And sorry, by the way, sorry about that. The office Wi-Fi router decided to bounce me off the network just at the critical moment. Hopefully we can return briefly to the last little snippet I was going to do, but I'll try not to.
I'll leave room for that, for sure. We can do that as well. Also, I see we got a couple of questions here, so maybe we'll just do that as well. So to start, like, any open source tool, you go to the GitHub, of course, Apache 2 license, and you can read how to contribute and how to work with Mizu. We also built a dedicated page called getmizu.io, which you just go here, get the latest release. The installation is super simple. Let me show you how you do that. This is my laptop. I am running on Apple M1 Silicon, so all I need to do is just copy that, paste it here, and voila, I've installed Kubernetes. Now, the same cluster that Tom showed you, this is the Kubernetes cluster behind the scenes. What I'm going to do, I'm going to just tap it. So I'm going to do Mizu, tap, enter, and I got killed. This is something that happens from time to time. Here we go. And what happened behind the scenes is that now you see Mizu here. Mizu installed itself in a namespace. I didn't have to configure that. All I did is Mizu tap. And now, if I will go to the same WebSocket that I'm working with Tom, a refresh here just shows me all the traffic from my computer, by the way, see unresolved to front end, but also what happens inside of the Kubernetes cluster. So just to show something, let's do a fault login. I just do that, and I can see the login requests coming to the cluster, and I can also see what happened behind, like the user service that kind of got that, and it's actually quite nice because I can go here, look at the request, look at the response, And if I have some kind of validation tools which come by default, I can also go to the rules and see which of them got broken. For example, let's go to one of, let's do like a normal login here. So Refael, login, and Mizu cluster shows all the requests that happened after my login. You can just go here, see that Refael has to go to front end. That's the request, that's the response. And the rules that got applied, the user experience, the default is 500. And of course, it was done in 74 milliseconds, so we're good to go. Now, Mizu comes with really good system of filtering. So let's say I want to see all the mocks that all the requests to the mock that got resolved. So all I need to do is just go here, click plus, click apply, and now Mizu will filter only the requests that my mock is answering. That's great. Actually, now if we'll go and just use the application, what you will know is which services are actually using my mock. So if I go to account, I can view some orders. If those services are using my mock, Mizu will show that. I can, of course, go and remove the filter and do something opposite. I can kind of go and see, let's do a small refresh here. And I can go and say, hey, I want to see the real traffic here. So just I'll kind of go in here, click the catalog, just edit here. I can, of course, go and say, hey, I want to make sure that show me everything that is over 31 milliseconds. That's another thing I can just do. Click apply and quickly go use my application, debug it, and see all the traffic here. Forgot to mention that, of course, I can remove the filter and view my Kafka, view my RabbitMQ, all the protocols that I'm using in an easy way. I want to track something from the user to the front end to the system that does the authentication, maybe the shipping cart that gets into Kafka. I can see all of that from here quite easily and debug it from here. So GitHub, don't forget to star us, getmizu.io, which you can see all the documentation and everything else there. And with that, let's move to our Q&A. So first question.
Do you want me to show Warmock Studio on the desktop briefly?
Go ahead.
Okay. Hopefully I'll be able to remain on the network for long enough this time to show you. Okay, so this is very brief. So like with WireMock open source, there's a standalone Java fat jar that you can run. And it's very simple. I can just type Java -jar and then WireMock Studio. You get this nice splash screen and you get the URL of the web console. So I can just take this URL and paste it into here. And voila. And much like I showed you in the Kubernetes cluster, I can create and edit my mock APIs from here, and then I can interact with my mocks over local hosts, on the ports that I've set, and I can do a similar thing. There's an individual Docker command or sort of a Docker compose configuration you can use to run it inside Docker if you're not keen on the idea of installing Java on your machine. And that's just quickly what I wanted to demo there, just to sort of give an idea of the flexibility of deployment available. And that's it. So I'll pass back to Refael for the Q&A now.
All right. So first thing we got, where can we get the Warmock Studio UI? Interesting. Tom, for you.
So I believe we are going to make it available pre-releasing the beta to the outside world for any one of you who wants to try it out. So Avi, I'm going to defer to you on this one because I think you were in charge of the specifics of that. But I think we're saying if you jump on a quick call with us,
yeah, we'll get there.
We'll get you set up and we'll send you some documentation and let you at it.
Sure, we'll get there. We'll go to the Q&A first because they've got some questions.
Okay.
First of all, let's have a small discussion, Refael and Tom. Why is it good to use both of them? I've got the API mocking and I've got the Mizu, which people are very loving it, I can see here. So let's just have a small chat before we jump into the Q&A.
Sure. So first of all, for this webinar, we had to use Mizu to make sure everything works correctly because we had some networking problems. So I'm already a customer of those two tools to get them up and running. And at least from my perspective, and then Tom, I'll be happy to hear yours from the mocking side. Usually when you get to like an isolated environment or you're running, you want to run a performance test, you have the mocks as a very crucial part of the application, but usually the mocks are the ones that perform quite well, and then you need to figure out how to debug the other part of that. Or for example, if you have a very complicated scenario that you need all the mocks to be aligned, and you need to track that, it just takes one request that is out of order to fail the entire scenario. How do you debug that? In a microservice environment where you have tens, probably hundreds of microservices, the tools today, kind of hard to do that. Mizu and Warmock gives you all the things you can. You saw how easy it is to change it on the fly, and you saw how easy it is to track the records, see the request response from other services, and they kind of complete each other because you can see what happened and then view the mock and adjust if needed.
Yeah, there's not much to add to that, really. I think, I suppose a couple of things. One is that when you're using WireMock, and this, I think this has been, a particular problem with it in the past. You kind of have to wire everything up before you can use it. You have to point your application under test to your WireMock instance, and when it's all working correctly, it's great, and you can get your job done. But yeah, the great thing with Mizu is because it's kind of passively seeing everything. You don't have to configure it correctly in order for it to see traffic from A to B. It kind of lets you to understand what's going on in an environment. Either when something's not working the way you expect, or perhaps when you're just not that familiar with it. If you turn up on a new project and you want to know, what services are there and what's talking to what, then it's kind of a great way to to visualize that. That's the first thing. I think the second thing is I would say the things that we've got planned in future in terms of integration between these two tools. So at the moment, they're two sort of very standalone tools, but we see a huge amount of potential for bringing them together and for automating some otherwise sort of quite complex processes. So the things I showed you where I was creating a mock API, I was wiring things up to a particular port number, changing the Kubernetes service definitions to wire stuff up. All of that is stuff that we can completely automate. You could just go and pick the things that you want to mock and have the tools do the rest for you. And that's what we're aiming for. And hopefully when you tune into our next webinar, you'll be able to see some of that in action. How these two tools have been working together can kind of be the sum of greater than the sum of their individual parts.
So there are some questions.
Yeah, but so just circle back. Warmock Studio going to be available really soon to you guys. We'll let everybody know, obviously, once it's public. If you want a quick snip to that, reach out to us. At the end, we'll just share a couple of links how to get in touch with us. So just making sure on that. Next question, again to you, Tom, and I think you've heard that. Maybe part my fault because of the protocols of Mizu is it possible to mock gRPC services with Warmock?
Right now, sadly, it's not, but this is very high on our list of priorities because people keep asking us this. So we are aiming to add that to WireMock and to Warmock Studio very soon.
Yeah, and by the way, those are actually great questions. We have a Slack community that you can just go in there. We can discuss that more because, if we implement gRPC and we need somebody to kind of test to validate that and make sure it's actually as you wanted it, reach out to us on the Slack community. Link comes later. Don, Mizu looks very slick. How does it, thank you very much. How does it compare to observability features offered by Dynatrace and Elastic? Wow. First, It's a point and shoot tool, right? You don't need to change your environment. You don't need to change anything. It's open source. You can just download it, command line, boom, you got it. Second thing is it really, I think, the only tool out there that is transmitting all those protocols directly to you. You don't need to have a log mechanism or something like that. It just show me where your kubectl is. I'll use the kubectl APIs, get you all the traffic, whether if it's RabbitMQ, Kafka, Redis, gRPC, REST APIs. There are more protocols coming and some really interesting features regarding security and encryption and how you deal with that coming really, really soon to you. So I think that will be the main difference between those tools. I think we license model of Warmock Studio. I think it's Tom. You'll take it on that, or it's because you mentioned something about free.
Yeah, sure. So at the moment it's free, but it's not yet an open source tool. I think that's a route we may well go down in the future, but we have some some things to sort out in terms of how we how we separate the sort of commercial from open source code, and obviously how we create kind of governance processes and a contribution process and all that kind of stuff. So we've decided for the time being, for expediency's sake, really, to get it out there just as a free tool, and it will always remain free at the very least. But we may also fully open source it in the future.
And following up, because another person asked exactly the same thing. You don't have to have Kubernetes to use Warmock Studio. As Tom showed, you can definitely do that locally. The cool thing is that you can do it as if it was locally if you have a Kubernetes cluster. Costa, I hope that answered your question. Andrew, wow, thank you very much. You nailed it with the, it's so difficult to trace throughout DC chained APIs. Probably I'm just saying that. Thank you very much. No tools are currently doing that. Awesome. Mock protocols are supported. Which mock protocols are supported as of today?
So right now it's anything HTTP based. So REST, SOAP, XML, HTTP, RPC type protocols like XML RPC and JSON RPC, that sort of thing. Like I mentioned, we are planning to do gRPC very soon because there's lots of rising demand for that at the moment. And I think further in the future we're definitely going to be looking at asynchronous protocols, sort of messaging protocols and parts, sort of asynchronous parts of HTTP as well.
Cool. Also, by the way, maybe related to services, there are a couple of mocks that you can already go and kind of have there automatically. I don't know if you showed it like an OAuth, I believe that you mentioned. So there are a couple of services that you can just take the template and just start working with them. If you're doing SSO or those kind of things.
Yeah, this is a very good point, actually. In fact, this is a specific piece of feedback. So the Mock Lab for a long time has had this OAuth 2 template where you can create essentially a generic OAuth 2 authorization server, and it behaves like the Google social login or any number of others. It follows that protocol, and it's pretty popular. But a lot of people say I want to run this inside my cluster like everything else. So that template is now in Warmup Studio, so you can just go in and select that when you create your mock API, and you'll have your OAuth 2 mock. And although it's always been possible to do this with Warmock, kind of use it a bit like building a fixed JSON web token, sort of out of context, and then pasting it into your stub. The advantage of this version is it's actually got all the sort of JSON web token machinery in there, so you get a proper live signed token and a unique signing key that you can access in the usual way and that kind of thing. So that's hopefully going to be pretty useful in itself.
By the way, I'll just put that here so you guys can just get the links. See, another question, is Mizu part of Warmock? No, not at the moment. 2 different open source. You can get them both. If you go to GitHub, Up9 Mizu, you have that there. Warmock, of course, you all know about that. You can just get warmock.org, for example, and get all the documentation there. those two tools are definitely going to get more closer together and help each other for that. Ananda Kumar, JMS messages, will it be possible in the future to support BPM-based tools like TIBCO? I don't know. Tom?
I mean, like I say, I think we definitely want to look at asynchronous protocols, and JMS could well end up being one of those. I think there's some work to do to figure out a kind of general model for asynchronous stubbing, because it's kind of a different beast to sort of something that's based on request response pairs like HTTP. But there's definitely demand for for messaging protocols in general, in particular mocking situations where you've got sort of messages being triggered when an HTTP request arrives, or something along those lines. And I think that the way we'll do it is to come up with a kind of general an expansion of WireMock sort of mapping format, so that you can express mappings between asynchronous message types. And then there'll be kind of a pluggable provider architecture, so we'll start adding, Kafka, Rabbit, whatever there is demand for. So I think, there's a, JMX could well fit under that framework quite nicely.
Thank you. Thank you for answering all the questions. That was a great presentation. I think it was tip of the iceberg of the capabilities that WireMock and Mizu are able to do. So dig in, go to getmizu.io or go to the GitHub and play around with them. Don't forget to star us on GitHub. It's very important for us. I've put some links in the chat. If you want to go to and join our Slack channel, it's a community. You can ask questions, get help. We're there all the time. We've got specialists there all the time. So just be a part of our community. It's very important for us. And also regarding the Warmock Studio. So it's ready. It's being deployed. We haven't set it out to anyone, but we are giving out to the people that join here. You can, I'll send you the invite, talk to our team, and we'll give you access to the studio. You can invite 10 team members from your company or your friends, use it, give us your feedback. We'll be very happy for you to be the first ones to use the Warmock Studio before we release it out to the public. So that's what we have for you for joining the webinar and being a part of this. And that's it. Tom, do you have anything else? Refael?
No, I don't think so. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to getting Warmock Studio out and in all of your hands. It's a beta at the moment because we want to hear about what's working and what isn't, and figure out what the sort of highest value things are that we can do with it next. So yeah, I hope that some or all of you will get in touch and get using it as early as possible.
Cool. So again, I'm putting the Calendly link to schedule a meeting with our team to get you set up. It's in the chat. I just dropped it there to just schedule a meeting, and we'll get you set up, and we'll help you build your first mocks, and that will get you started. That's it. Refael?
Well, thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Avi, for setting this up. And we'll see you on the next one.
Yeah, we'll email this out to you as well with all the links and stuff so you have it. And keep posted for our next one. Cool. Thank you. Goodbye, guys. Thank you. Goodbye.